Welcome to the Shipping Podcast, where I meet interesting maritime professionals sharing their passion for the shipping industry and their everyday job. I am your host. My name is Lena Gothberg. Hello, Shipping Podcast lovers. Welcome to the 138th episode of the Shipping Podcast. I hope you're safe and that you're following the recommendations of health authorities to continue to stay safe. As we are in a pandemic, we need to be persistent. During the time, we can start to adjust to the new reality, whatever that will be. And that is what I wanted to talk to you about today. This online world is not new to me anymore. I discovered this parallel universe some 7 or 8 years ago, during the time when I was thinking about what to do with the rest of my career. I had just been sacked from my previous job, which is a totally different story, but one that I'm very content with today, that I realized that there are so many things happening online, which I had no idea about, since I was rooted in the analog world. I was in my 50s, and I was a successful businesswoman who had learned the ropes from my mentors. All men, all older than me, and all very analog. They were what I call the handshake generation. During the time when I was thinking about my future career, I was upset about what almost everyone that I have met in the maritime industry is upset about. That no one knows about us. No one knows about the exciting industry that we are a part of. And that is so sad. You always have to explain that to your friends who are not in the maritime industry. It was also the time when the news reporters on TV started to report about Facebook and how that company grew exponentially, that I started to think and realize that I should probably use my experience from my career in the maritime industry to try and change the image of our industry, and doing so by understanding the strategies behind communication and how to use social media. It didn't take me long to understand that starting a podcast and disrupting the traditional maritime news reporting by audio had to be the way forward. That was 5 years ago, and here we are, 138 interviews later, and more than 250,000 downloads later. Now you understand that I have had to be persistent and adapt new skills earlier in my life. And I think that that is also what the maritime industry teaches you once you're in here. That nothing stays the same, and you need to be tough to work in it. So during this time of self-isolation, I have spent a lot of time attending webinars, both in the maritime industry, but also in other industries that are doing cool things. I learn a lot, and I see a lot. I can see that the maritime industry is moving forward. It's like everything else. People in this industry are used to changing circumstances. Maybe not as horrible as this current one, but still, I see so many attempts to go online with interesting conversations and presentations. Some are really leaning forward, and some have just not realized that there is a different thing to organize an event online compared to in real life. Some realize their limitations and seek help from experts. Some of them think that they know it all, and how hard can it be? Well, online, everyone becomes very transparent. People will see if you are sincere and want to deliver something useful to your participants and sponsors, or if you're not. In my little corner of the world, I have had to adjust the shipping podcast as well. And I have adapted to making interviews online instead of in person. The possibility for me to 1. Travel, 2. Meet interesting people, and 3. Keep my finger on the pulse, that changed at the same time as it did for everyone else. I was stranded at home, like you, so I had to become creative again. When I had the possibility to meet people and sit down with them and have an interview, they were somewhat surprised when I brought out my microphones and recording equipment, since many of my successors in the maritime podcasting space are recording on their mobiles. And here I come, bringing a bag of equipment. I can tell you it's because I'm picky with the sound quality. I am competing with podcasts from other industries. I did some research together with my editor Jen, and I found out that for me to go online with my interviews, the best option for me would be to capture the sound of my guest on Zoom, and that Jen then should do some editing to make it sound almost like if we were interviewing in person, together, sitting together. That is, if the guest didn't have the possibility to record her or himself and email me the audio file. I needed to have some options for my guests. So I bought a Zoom license and started to think about who you would be interested to listen to right now. Everyone in the maritime industry knew about the crew changes and the challenges the seafarer had been facing. So it was natural for me to try and reach out to a seafarer stuck on board his ship. And since I know Rasmus Blomqvist since before, it was easy for me to reach out to him. He was on board a Stena ship, and they know that I am not a news reporter. I am not out to find a scoop, rather to highlight a problem that everyone wants to solve. So we got the permission to record an episode. For episode 135, I realized that a Vista friend of mine is currently working in New York for the US Coast Guard. Her name is Sarah Brennan. I have always been impressed by Sarah when I have met her. But what made me realize that it was Sarah that I wanted on the podcast was that the same week she was carrying the Instagram account for Vista International called Vistagram, where one woman in the maritime industry from a different country every week is carrying the Instagram and showing the world what it's like to work in the maritime industry. This is one of the things, besides the shipping podcast, that I am the proudest of, that we have started a curated account on Instagram for women in the maritime industry. It's so interesting to see what the women are sharing and how generous they are with photos and insightful posts. It's been going on since May 2016, and over 200 women have carried it. And now we have approximately 4,000 followers. You're welcome to follow the Vistagram on Instagram. Just search for Vista International in one word. Anyway, Sarah Brennan, she led the interview with her superiors by saying, "You can trust Lena. She wants to highlight people in the maritime industry. We will not speak about anything that can sound political or be misinterpreted in any way." And of course we didn't. Sarah, she went out to sit in her car to get a better surrounding for the sound for me. Can you imagine that? And then Katie Ware, in episode 136. She had been on my target list for a long while. If you haven't understood it by now, she's a very important person who hardly have a moment to herself, and definitely not time to spend on me and my podcast. Katie is in charge of so many things, and you need to listen to the episode to understand everything that she does. But she also realized that what I'm trying to do is to raise the profile of the industry, and that I have become an outlet where young people gather to listen to what I have to say. To Katie, the Zoom link was a problem. You have probably heard about the problems around cybersecurity that Zoom had. But that didn't stop her. We made the interview through her private email and on her private device. I mean, my guests are stars. They are stars of the sea, all of them. And then the last episode, the latest episode, with Sakura Kuma. I decided to ask the person furthest away from me, in a place where I will probably never travel to, in Japan, to participate on the show, and she said yes. Sakura had the same counter-trust from her IT department that Katie had. So Sakura recorded on her mobile while we had a video chat over WhatsApp, and then she emailed me the audio file so that Jen, my editor, could edit us together. I had recorded my end of the interview on my regular microphone, the one I'm speaking into right now. So why am I telling you all this? I'm trying to explain how to adapt to the time and how I had to come up with new ideas to continue to deliver new episodes to my loyal tribe of listeners. I don't want to let you down. I want to continue to support my editor with job, and I'm too stubborn to give up now. I am curious. I am a disruptor in myself, just being me, and I'm all for change and development. So I am convinced that even the maritime industry will take a gigantic leap once the wheels start rolling again. Digital communication is here to stay, and I am part of the change. Who should I reach out to the next? Who are you interested in listening to that doesn't have any problems with some unconventional recordings and who wants to contribute to raising the profile of the shipping industry? Drop me a line at hello@shippingpodcast.com and I will see what I can do. Meanwhile, I have some feedback from listeners who has sent me emails to that inbox, hello@shippingpodcast.com, which I want to share with you. But first I would like to apologize on beforehand if I do not pronounce the names correct. I'm sorry about that. Ira Isaacs, he writes, I have been listening to your podcast for the last 6 months, and I always find your guests very interesting to listen to. Your podcast captures the diversity of the industry and also shares stories of people who have entered the industry without the formal shipping background. I noticed you did not have many guests from the Middle East region, and I was wondering if you planned on having anyone from this part of the world. No, Ira, I haven't been able to afford traveling to the Middle East, and I can understand between the lines that you want to become a guest. Maybe now is the time when we can do this in cyberspace. Andrew Gibson from Stena writes, Good day, Lena. I'm writing to you for 2 reasons. The first is to say that I have great admiration for the podcast and find it a very effective and informative way of learning about the positive work and interesting people which exist in our shipping industry. Many thanks. And the second reason is to suggest some guests. Well, Andrew, maybe now is the time for the ones I can't travel to see. Blair Waterman, a Scottish third engineer on DP2 offshore supply vessels. Good evening. Listen to the shipping podcast for the first time and thoroughly enjoyed it. Thanks for everything and all the work done for the podcast and to make the shipping industry more known. I noticed there have been no junior seagoing engineer on the podcast. If you're ever looking for that demographic, I would love to contribute. I say it again, Blair, maybe now is the time. Dylan Barrett from the Cinderella team, the startup that the Shipping Podcast happened to inspire, keeps sending me updates on their work and also suggestions on guests to the podcast. I can't wait for this pandemic to end so that I can go and see the people who I have inspired to start a startup. Sean Buckley writes, "Hello Lena, we really enjoy listening to your podcast. We are in Durban, South Africa, with a view of the ocean and all the ships lined up, waiting to get into port. My dad, Charles Buckley, 89 years in July, loves ships and shipping, and your podcast has been wonderful for us during our national lockdown. 50 plus days already and very strict. Thank you for your interesting interviews and stories. We would love to hear a story related to Durban, Sub-Saharan African largest shipping terminal." Thank you, Sean. Here I think I need some help from my listeners. The contacts that I had in the port of Durban have left. So if anyone has any suggestions, please let me know. hello@shippingpodcast.com. That was my email address. And lastly, but not least, Wilco Brun, an R&D project manager at Raytheon Anschütz, a manufacturer of professional navigation applications. He writes, "Dear Lena, about 2 years ago, I started a new job and all of a sudden was commuting a lot by car. Thus I thought it was a good idea to make better use of my time behind the wheel and started subscribing to several podcasts to listen to on my drive to work and back home. And what I must admit is that the Shipping Podcast is the only one that I regularly listen to ever since. So thank you for your great work that you're doing for our industry." Yo! And then he comes with some suggestions for future guests. Thank you. I will start to work my way through these suggestions. But I wonder, where are the suggestions from the female listeners? Women in the maritime industry, you need to speak up. You need to give me something to work with here. I am carrying the torch for diversity, but I need your help. Not that you need to suggest female speakers, all of you, but at least I want to see some emails in my inbox from female listeners, because I know that you're out there. You tell me when I see you. Okay, this became so much longer than I planned. I must run. There are more webinars to be held and more podcast guests to be chased down. Stay safe out there. Until the next time, from me to you, over and out. Thank you for listening to the Shipping Podcast. Don't forget to tell everyone that you meet that there is a Shipping Podcast available and that they should download it and listen to the maritime professionals who are sharing their passion for the shipping industry.